Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. It's been a little while since I did any tabletop videos for the channel. Admittedly, it's been very busy. The months of November and early December are extremely hectic in La Casa de Zero for unrelated to the channel reasons, but suffice to say I've got some time to actually do a little bit of a good read and review here. And added bonus, I've actually participated in the public playtest of this particular adventure, so I know a bit more about it than your average person here, having actually gone through it. So this is, there we go, Escape from Miklagard. This is by Ivan Cantero Munoz, who I interviewed previously. It was during that interview that I first heard about this adventure, was currently in development. Published by Stella Gamma Publishing and designed for use with old school essentials. Now, this basically just means that it'll run perfectly well with any kind of BX derivative OSR game you can think of. So, just a little bit of tweaking is all you'll need for that. But obviously it's made for that in mind. Although many of the mechanics are setting neutral, system neutral, suffice to say, just to add for compatibility. So looking at the cover here, yeah, this is very much Escape from New York. You can see that right away, the way that things are put together. The head of the statue here being where the Statue of Liberty's head would have been in that movie poster. Miklagard is the wealthiest city in the world. You came here for the gold. You are leaving for your life. Yeah, this is the vibe we're going for here. Kudos to Sami Hamea, whoever the hell that is, for the cover art. That was really good. So, going to the table of contents here. Things are very well organized. I like the fact that each individual, subsection is also mentioned, even if it's all on the same page. It's good if you're having to quickly go to a particular section to know exactly which page to go on, so that's always nice. It's not that much. It doesn't look like much, but there is a lot more under the hood here than you might think. So, what is this adventure? This is a city adventure in the sense that the entire adventure takes place within the city of Miklagard, the capital of the Grand Empire, the wealthiest city in the world. And it's currently setting itself on fire. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So a lot of its city adventures are closer to, gazetteers in the sense that the city, you enter the city as it's running and you have the adventure there and stuff like that. Sometimes it's, more skullduggery and sneaking around like something like Lankmar. Other times there's, other events happening and political intrigue, something like Tolas or Baldur's Gate or something like that, where you have different factions all interacting. Here you do too, except they've done, with the under the table bickering and are now just gone to DEFCON 1 and the entire city is tearing itself to pieces. This is a sandbox, but the sandbox is on fire, if that makes any sense. And it's a wonderful thing. So what is the background here? This is, as I said, the capital of the Grand Empire, and the Empire had a bit of a civil war recently. And suffice to say, the current emperor managed to win that civil war by hiring a whole lot of mercenaries to fight for him. Unfortunately, he's not been able to pay them, having basically bankrupted the empire in order to do so. He has now run away. The mercenaries are now in the city, have just learned that they're not going to get paid, and are now rioting and looting everything in sight, which is causing everything to blow up. All these different adventurer groups who were also hired on to, enforce the peace are now, taking out their rivalries and feuds amongst each other. The imperial factions that are still in the city are, trying to fill a power vacuum. And, well, there's also a bit of a ticking time bomb that we'll get to when we get to these later chapters that none of these people are aware of at the time, and it's going to blow everything up in their face. So this is definitely one of those adventures where you take a couple of beginning level characters, so like when I played this, I was a third level character, and just, stuck in the middle of this as all the stuff's blowing up, and now you have the option of doing pretty much whatever you want. Spend as much time as you want trying to maybe save the people around you, get rich off looting yourself, deal with, any kind of events that are coming your way, and eventually just try to get the hell out of the city before something does you in. So there is definitely a lot to talk about here. You got a basic setting overview of just getting an idea of what things were like before, everything went to hell. There's some ideas of Miklagard, where that is, the free companies, which are the mercenaries, freelance fellowships, the various smaller adventuring parties that are also in the city, the civs, which are the equivalent of, the blues and the greens, the people who did the fighting revolting during the Nika revolts, those various gangs formed by citizens who do follow a charioteer or gladiatorial team from the arena or support an entertainer. I will say this, there is a kind of odd turns of phrase, odd syntax at certain points. Ivan's not a native English speaker, he's, Spanish. So it never gets in the way of comprehension, at least, or, rules comprehension or text, but it is something you notice. So like, for instance, right here, the last imperial civil war did cripple the Grand Empire's demi-professional army. You can see that, there's some odd syntax, but never really gets in the way, and it's more something that kind of like, fades in the background as you're focusing more on the descriptions and the rules and stuff like that. So it's really not that much of a big deal. So then gets a basic description of Miklagard before things go to hell. The number of harbors. It's just basic background information. Not entirely essential, but it's good things to have because it covers stuff that players are likely to ask. Like, okay, are there harbors in the city? Yes, they are. This is where they are. This is where you get to them. And it does mention, like, basic landmarks and stuff like that, which are, very helpful for that. And after that, we go here, making it out alive of Miklagard, or just getting out alive. So you have the basic map. This is one criticism I make. The map, we'll get into why it's divided up into hexes if we get into it, but I would have liked each of these landmarks to actually have some text referencing them. You can kind of make out which ones are which based on the descriptions later on in the chapter when we get to the actual landmarks, but trying to figure out exactly which ones are which can be a little bit difficult. Yeah, having them labeled would have probably been a bit more helpful, but ultimately it's not that much of a problem. So the idea is each hex here, which is your standard 6 mile hex, it contains any number of streets and buildings, stuff like that. So you don't want to necessarily have a map that covers every last little thing, which is why we have tables, building generators, so many building generators, and they're pretty good too. They definitely have a lot of flavor in that they reflect the kinds of buildings you'd find in a city like Constantinople during this era of the Byzantine Empire, which is the main source of inspiration for the actual architecture and stuff like that. You definitely get that sense of both the austerity of ancient Rome coming through, but also the opulence and stuff like that is known for the Byzantine Empire at the time. So simple buildings, residences and stuff like that. So you get basically rolling for residence, commerce, public, special ed, and special buildings, depending on what the players decide to interact with. And then, determining from there what you get. Certain artisans, what's found inside these buildings, as well as here you can see what, kinds of examples of stuff you can find here. So, for instance, if you go into a basic residence here, it gives an idea like of what kind of, building we're dealing with, which it makes sense that there'd be a lot of repetition there because these kinds of cities had the equivalent of 3 of the 5-story tall buildings that you would think were rather modern in this case, but actually date back to the Romans and stuff like that. And then you have an idea of what's happening inside when the players decide to go in there. Personally, I'd recommend rolling a couple of these out as during your prep or before running, just so you can speed things up at the table. Just, okay, they walked into this place, they find, a public building or something like that. I've got a couple of public buildings, roll for which one. Okay, I got a hospital. I've got a hospital ready to go, and I've got, some idea of what's happening. Just, speed things up a little bit. But, if you want to just roll them right there at the table too, there's no problem with that. And you have different things. All you have, for instance, you have a district hall here or a school. Yeah, school, and then, everything going hell while the building is abandoned, but for the ghost of a kid who died by a prank that went wrong. Spirit is benevolent, but not completely aware of its situation, subconsciously possessing any players or retainers with the intention of looking after its parents. So that's something you don't have in every day. Yeah. And then, you have all sorts of other stuff here. All sorts of craziness. And it does lend itself towards having a more, focused kind of aesthetic, because this way you have the different descriptions of buildings that really tie into not just the city, a city of like this, but the city of Miklagard itself. So you have certain things like the different minor monuments and stuff like that, that statue dedicated to an arcane spellcaster hero of the Grand Empire, to whom, due to local superstition, students did offer scrolls containing magic spells. So yeah, you can find some scrolls as just some random magic scrolls there. So you have these kinds of little. Sometimes these things are good. Sometimes these things are really bad. Sometimes they're just neutral depending on how you approach them. So you've got some good stuff to explore, and then we'll get to eventually the landmarks. But there is one other little thing. You see, you're on a timer during this entire adventure. What you don't know, and what no one knows, is that as the Emperor was running away, he sent a message to his Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard were, Norse or Rus, basically Viking type folks who were acting as the personal guard for the Emperor at certain points during the Byzantine Empire. In this case, they're still kind of Viking types. They're frost giants, a lot of them. And the Emperor just sent word to them as, things are breaking out. I need you back in the city. Your one job, your final order for me, destroy Miklagard so that no one else may rise to the throne of the Grand Empire. And they're going to do it. And they're going to be coming, whether the players do, no matter what the players do, they're coming. And the way this works is anytime the party stops to fight, loot, and rest, the referee should add a counter on the Eschaton clock pool, which basically means you take a bunch of black D6s and just, start stacking them. And every time you get to a random events, which we'll get on later, you're rolling those dice. So things as time goes on, things will just keep getting crazier and crazier. And the more time the players spend here, the more dangerous things are going to start being. And once those dice add up to a certain amount, oh yeah, they are arriving. And then you're rolling 24 times 24 D6, which will give you the number of frost giants present in the streets of Miklagard. Multiplied per 10 if the roll result is below 50. So yeah, you have a small army of really pissed off giants who are just going to come in and destroy everything. Their goal is to raise the city to the ground and kill anybody involved. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting little thing. And there are some of the events that we'll see that foreshadow this as we get into it. So we got those, and then we have the landmarks. Each one of those hexes on the map is centered around a particular landmark. It's recommended that the players start here at the first step, which is the mile marker of the Grand Empire. Each one of these comes with various things. There's an initial description of them, just to show what it is in there, and it does mention also how much these things are worth, because these are the landmarks of the wealthiest city in the wealthiest empire in the world. Yeah, there is treasure to be had here, but it's being protected by also the most powerful empire in a fantasy world. So it's not just, guards and stuff like that. We're talking traps and magic here, so you have to watch out. So like for instance, going here, the Lake of the Goddesses, which is this beautiful circular, lake with great statues, as you can see here. And this big old sphere right there. And there's mention that each one of these things has like diamonds for eyes, wings made of gold, and the globe here is made of platinum and stuff like that. It's just, if you can somehow get this stuff out of the city and sell it, you'd be making a mint. But if any of the gems sculpted as eyes or the platinum sphere is pried loose, it triggers a non-mechanical magical trap, starting with the platinum orb resembling the world suddenly split opening below and loading 4 dozen spheres of sodium coated in a hydrophobic alchemical substance that will start dissolving as soon as it enters contact with the water. Those of you who have taken basic chemistry classes knows what happens when sodium comes in contact with water. There's lots of inventive little Grimtooth traps kind of contraptions involved in these things. Although, if you can figure out exactly what's going on, then you will be able to actually, figure out ways of getting this loot with you. Of course, then encumbrance rules come into play. And, well, how are you going to get out of the city? How are you going to conceal the fact you have all this treasure when everybody else is out there looting and is now eyeing you with all this stuff? That's going to be interesting. There's also, various places like the Imperial Hippodrome. There's, Cistern, the temple, the equivalent of the, main central to the Alma Sophia there with the great dome-topped temple, this one here. You have, Imperial Will, various, university, the Imperial Palace, the Senate buildings, all with their own particular, either events, traps, puzzles, events, all sorts of stuff here. And of course, all the different looting, because not just one of the great things about this that I describe here is that it actually describes how you go about looting this stuff and the amount of time and extra, Eshton clock dice that you're throwing into the pool when you do so. So yeah, you can get yourself some really great stuff out of this, but it's gonna cost you in terms of time, and time is something that you don't necessarily know that you were running low on. And there's some interesting stuff here. Well, I remember we ended up going through. Let's see, we went through here to the Imperial Will, which is this big tower, which is the site of the Imperial Army. And there are cannons in there, and without realizing it, we kind of got within their range, and they start firing on us. Ooh, boy. It was not pleasant. We just almost got wiped out. I think most of my henchmen got completely obliterated from a cannon hit. Ugh, nasty. Oh, that was a fun time. So we've got all these different landmarks, each one with their own stuff. And then, of course, chaos. Just the craziness that's happening in the streets. And you have all these different results that you roll those black dice to determine exactly what's going to happen. So if you just got the one, okay, things aren't too bad. As soon as you start getting to the higher stuff, things get absolutely nuts. Ranges from just some not too dangerous, just some people panicking or stuff like that. High-rise building collapsing because of the all the violence that's been happening in the street. Or, for instance, as you can see here with this axe here, arrow or hand axe of massive dimensions just falls from the skies, thrown or fired by one of the frost giants approaching to the city in their dracars as a warning of their arrival, impacting into a building or right in the middle of the street where the party happens to be. Yeah. Definitely there's going to be some crazy shit happening. And then you have, running into sages trying to escape with all sorts of scientific instruments and tomes. Two rival adventurers who decide that the best moment to settle their differences is right here and right now. The entire street has become an inferno due to uncontrolled fire produced by widespread violence. All sorts of crazy stuff. Part of the aqueduct collapses. All sorts of insane stuff. A dragon. You can have in bits where a dragon has been lured to Miklagard by the riots and decide to take advantage of this. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Of course, may force a temporary alliance to drive him out or plainly slay it. That is true. You're definitely going to require some help there. Someone defiles the crypts and releases a bunch of zombies or wights. The Gruthak arrive on dire dragonflies, which brings us to the other stuff here, the opposing forces. So like I said, this adventure has a bunch of obviously the different Imperial factions of different tiers here, as you can see, which gives you an idea of okay, if depending on the demands of the situation, you have different tiers of what can be brought in to deal with players when they're antagonize somebody, or just depending on what kind of situation that you're developing here. So, for instance, the Imperial factions, the Demos Militia, the Imperial Army, the Free Companies, they have different groups depending on what is up with them. So, and of course, descriptions of the various dramatis personae, the main characters, most of which you're not going to run into, but it's good to have an idea. This is the leader of the Frost Giants that you might run into, and holy shit, dangerous. You have, the various description of the Grand Empire's army here. This is what their cavalry is like. This adventure definitely, it is going to be a bit difficult to bring into an existing setting simply because of just how off the wall some of these things are. So yeah, Imperial Heavy Cavalry. I mean, just imagine this thing charging at you. Holy crap, even if the lance doesn't kill you, this thing will bite your head clean off. So you get, descriptions of all the, stats and stuff like that for all the different, characters that you'll like that are part of these factions, but also what do they want? So, for instance, the Grand Empire's army wants to pacify the streets of Miklagard, restore the power of the Senate, eliminate any opposition that supports the Imperial system, and when the Varangian Jotun do arrive, their priority will be to slay the giants with the minimum destruction possible of the city. These guys are kind of the good guys, but depends on what you're up to, too, So yeah, these are basically like what you may call it. Well, I always forget these guys. The equivalent of knights in this era. Oh, the name will get to me anyway. But yeah, you get the idea. These guys are not to be fucked with. These were the guys who were in the Imperial Well shelling me during that adventure. You also have, like I mentioned, the Gruthag. These are like the barbaric horde outside of the city who are now taking advantage of the situation. They're here to slay everybody who is not them and destroy anything that is civilized and built, agriculture, metalworking, and herding, which are all considered great offenses to these creatures. Basically, these guys are heavily mutated, alchemically modified horrors that literally meld metal scales onto themselves to form armor and use bioengineered or mutated giant bugs as both cavalry and weapons. They are absolutely mental, kind of horrible creatures. Oh, like the crack rifle, a cross between a mantis shrimp and a bombardier beetle that's used as a musket. Like, oh, come on, in what other adventure are you going to see something like that, right? Absolutely nuts. Dire katydids. Dire dragonflies, their air force, for crying out loud. That is just absolutely nuts. Merged traits and features from both mollusks and arthropods, reminding you of a nightmarish hybrid of dragonfly, moth, lobster, and locust. I mean, with explosive eggs. I mean, seriously, that is nuts. You've got, various, the other mercenary troops, obviously, the ones that are actually ripping the city apart to begin with. You have these guys with the Elfland Galaglass, these half-elven, just mercenaries. They're just going off doing their own thing. You have the Steve's Militia, which are the, Nike Revolt types. Various, not too much, mostly dangerous due to their numbers rather than anything in particular, but, they are kind of have their own thing going with their own particular, also, motivations, as you can see here. Yeah, they're going to want to get the hell out of the city there. Imperial Millipede. Imperial Millipede! Seriously, like this whole empire is built on, a combination of historical references and giant bugs. Great stuff. Goblinoid Lanchnecks. This is kind of fun. The Lanchnecks are all female hobgoblin muscle mommies who are basically taking as many male prisoners of remarkable qualities as possible for breeding purposes, among other things. Basically, they have a curse on them that means that they cannot have any male heirs, many male children, because of an ancient witch curse that's stuck on them. So basically, they're female-only green-skinned humanoids who are actually stunned and actually hesitate to attack male characters of particular high charisma. So that was kind of actually funny, interesting. So they have an entire Lanchneck company in the city there. Absolutely nuts. With, Zweihanders and blunderbusses. It's crazy. Myrmidon hoplites, which is to say, ant people. So that's going. They fight in ancient Greek way with phalanxes. And of course, the Saurian condottieri, because you need those, Italian city-state era mercenaries to really, get things going. And these guys, I mean, come on, look at this. This is just cool. It's a freaking lizard man wearing, a full chainmail hauberk. That is just cool. They come equipped. These guys are the most eclectic because they kind of include a whole bunch of different, species in their particular condottas. So, yeah, they've got these guys, but they also have Mycelian pugilists, which are basically like, mushroom people, fist fighters, samurai centaurs, dog-headed Mamluks, and each one of these things, they have their own kind of backstory, which doesn't really matter too much in terms of the adventure itself, but really makes me wish that this setting gets some extra, work done onto it in expansion, because there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Yeah, gnomic behemoth, which is basically, what is it called here? Paracetharotherium, basically, prehistoric animals and stuff like that. Oh, this is just like so absolutely nuts. Like this universe is just like, very inventive in terms of like how it mixes and mashes all these different influences together, uh and different, land vehicles and stuff like that, or different equipment. All sorts of great stuff here. And of course, you can loot all this stuff from them if you can manage to get it from them, so which is always nice. And of course, freelance fellowships. These are the different adventuring parties that are currently just, running around the city, either trying to help people, trying to take advantage of people, or dealing with vendettas between each other, or dealing, with just trying to get the hell out, just the same as the players are. People you could actually use as examples of, adventurers that you could team up with, get into fights with, or just, play as, who knows, different characters here. And then, some extra ideas of how to go on afterwards once the adventure's over and the players have managed to get out. So, yeah, this adventure has a lot going for it. There are a couple of, little niggles there. I would have preferred if the map was a bit more informative in terms of, like, where things are in terms of landmarks. It's also a little bit, pencily in comparison to some of the nicer, more, I guess professional looking artwork in that, but, it's not too much of a problem. And I will say that definitely this is the kind of adventure that I think probably would require a bit of the DM prep, at least at the start, just, to roll out a couple of streets and stuff like that, just so you have an idea of where you want to go in terms of like plopping things down. You may just, so maybe also if you want to have a couple of, city streets already done up per hex, so that when the players arrive in a particular area, you can start describing things in a certain way. But really, there's nothing stopping you from just rolling things out as you go along. And thanks to the amount of replayability in terms of that, the city's never the same twice, and the events that happen are never the same twice. You could play this adventure with multiple parties using the same players and never have the same results. Just, depending on the motivations of the players, where they start, and depending on their level. If you want to play with some higher level characters, have players, if you're comfortable, tweaking, character classes and character species, races and stuff like that, having them be part of those mercenary companies that are currently rioting, that'd be pretty cool, or part of the Imperial Army and stuff like that, trying to, deal, instead of trying to escape from the city, trying to take the city back. That'd be something interesting as well. There's a lot of, possibilities in terms of this, and it's a situation that you don't really see that often, where the city itself is the dungeon, in a sense, where you take this what is normally just a sandbox of one particular kind and then flip it completely on its head. And I also enjoy the addition of that, not only the timer that is actually, building up as the characters do stuff, but also that it influences not just, the end game with the frost giants arriving and wrecking the place, but also having it gradually increase the intensity and craziness of the random events that will occur in the city as things goes on. You also have just, the possibility of some random house that you roll having random event happen and having that be the basis of the whole rest of the evening's events, because, who knows, you might actually just, go off on a tangent on something that completely changes the outlook of your players have on the whole situation. So yeah, this has been Escape from Miklagard by Ivan Cantera-Munoz. It is for Old School Essentials, published by Stilagama Games, and yeah, I recommend taking a look at it. The PDF is available on DriveThruRPG if you want to take a look. Link will be in the description. I have been Zero Sun. Like, share, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it informative, and I hope to see you next time. Adios.